Apple strategy shift on the iPhones impacts how Tesla does business, and Tesla's strategy is our story for today. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Thanks for joining us. If you're a repeat visitor, welcome. If you're a first time, also welcome. We also want to note that it's our Patreon supporters that makes this whole show possible, and we're greatly appreciative of that support. We also wanted to note that if you're interested in daily updates on Tesla for investing and trading ideas, as well as discounts on private shows on how to trade better, etc., please join us on Patreon. The link is below. So today we wanted to focus on the fact that it was just announced that Apple has delivered its new iPhone. And there are some interesting developments with it. In particular, there was a huge shift in strategy that occurred, but it seemed kind of subtle, not so subtle. The shift was, you'll notice that in Apple's case, they typically, over the last 20 or 25 years, have focused on developing new product ideas, like the iPhone, for example, and then delivering them at the top end of the cost curve. So what this has meant is that as you end up with a sort of a halo effect where Apple ends up developing new technology, that technology is copied by others with or without patents. And now all of a sudden, you have a situation where Apple is earning good money on a smaller number of units at the high end, and all of the rest of the market has been ceded to competitors. The big change that occurred with the newest iPhone 12 is the fact that Apple is now offering a whole range of pricing starting at $699 all the way up to the $1299 top of the line iPhone. This is kind of big news because Apple has stopped leaving a large amount of money on the table. And the effect is that you now have a situation where you have some interesting dynamics going on here. So when I first saw what they were up to, my initial reaction is, oh no, I can't believe they did this because this is a really, really bad idea. The reason for that is that my thought process was, if you're offering a $699 or a $799 phone to your upgrade customers, what's the incentive for people to pay $1,000, $1,200 for a phone if they can get one cheaper? And that's a legitimate question. Basically, I do believe there are customers that would have paid for a higher price phone that will choose the lower phones. But the other side of that argument is that there's a huge number of customers at the lower price points that Apple has not been able to bring in previously unless it was for an old phone. So now with the upgrade to 5G, this is an opportunity where there's a huge number of folks who are going to be upgrading to take advantage of the new capabilities of the phone. And so there's going to be a trade-off between giving up on certain customers who would have paid more for a more expensive phone and broadening the bottom end to pick up a broad range of customers that you would have lost. So do you know what those exact numbers are, and therefore you can blend them into your analysis? I'd say the answer is they don't know the exact number yet until the sales start occurring. But one thing is definitely clear: because of the ecosystem process that Apple has, there'll certainly be Apple customers that are upgrading, but there's going to be a whole new group of customers who can afford the lower price phones that have wanted in on the Apple infrastructure for a long time. And now this is their opportunity to get there. So I wanted to suggest then that there's an interesting trade-off between reducing the number of high-end customers that upgrade or buy the new phone, and then getting the bottom of the price range for phone customers to join in on the Apple revolution. And I think that on initial blush, they will lose those high-end sales, but I do think that the number of ways they sell other services, including apps that people pay for, music, all these other suite of services in the Apple infrastructure is now being offered to a broader group of customers. The other thing is that because you're offering lower features on those lower phones, you now have the feature of the fact that there's still an incentive for people to upgrade, and those that want, for example, a bigger screen will choose the more expensive models to get it. And so I think that in general, after first blush, this whole process totally makes sense. So the question is, how and why does this impact Tesla, and sort of how do we discuss this? Well, the interesting thing about it is that Tesla and Apple's headquarters are about 6 or 7 miles apart, maybe 3 exits or so on the freeway. And so what's happening or been happening in Silicon Valley is there's been an evolution of process when it comes to patents and how to manage those patents relative to competitors. In the case of Apple, as we all know, they came out with the iPhone. It was quickly copied by Samsung, and Samsung basically went into a very long court battle to actually validate their right to copy Apple's patents. And the court battle still continues, and Apple has gotten a lot of legal bills. Yet I believe there's $1 billion settlement, but the net impact of all that litigation was low. So there are all these interesting strategies that are going on in the Valley relative to how patents are handled. It turns out if you're a small company like Tesla, you're relatively young, you have a small patent portfolio. What happens is that if you go to court against a Samsung, a Microsoft, any of these big guys, they have huge patent portfolios, and they will actually search through their portfolio and see if there's any way that they can find some minor violation that you might have had on work that you've done, and leverage that in the court for the battle, as well as leveraging it into a settlement. So one of the comments made to me by one of the venture capitalists was that the problem has become that it's almost better for you to get into the marketplace and get as widely distributed as possible, as quickly as possible, in order to facilitate your existence. Because if you solely rely on your ability to sue and roll through the patents in court process, there's a very high likelihood you'll spend a lot of money on legal fees, but there's also a challenge that over all that spending, you may not get very far. So Tesla's 75% open patent process kind of makes sense in this regard. And it also, they have about 25% of it that they haven't patented, that they've sort of kept under wraps in terms of things that the company's doing that are successful. So how do we apply what's going on with Apple and this iPhone to Tesla? Well, as you've noticed, Elon has really focused on how he's going to lower prices, and he keeps chasing customers at lower price points. So much of the Apple strategy that we're kind of seeing right now has already been kind of implemented by Elon at Tesla, and he's still chasing that process. So as you can see in the last battery announcement, there was a process chase that went on there where he has further made the effort to identify through their newest battery how they're going to drop down to a $25,000 price point for the vehicle in a couple of years. So yes, Elon is pursuing the strategy of vehicles at different price points. I would say that Elon himself is a little bit struggling with all of this because it's illustrated in the Model Y. If I want to put out a bounty, if you want to earn $5 from us, and we'll pay for the first 10 folks who can find this and send me a note about this, one of the things you'll notice is, other than the introduction day for Tesla, we've been searching for a photo of Elon in the Model Y for the last year and a half, and have never found one. And so one of the things Elon pointed out is that the Model Y is Tesla's most important vehicle. In the future, it'll end up being 59% of the vehicles sold, and he's very clear on that. The thing about it is that I really think that of his most beloved vehicles, that would be the Model X. And the more features that Model Y picks up, be it range, be it price, et cetera, the fewer customers who are inclined to buy the Model X, and therefore the faster that vehicle is sort of heading out into non-existence. So, one of the features I thought was interesting to watch recently that I didn't even think that was an issue was we visited a local service facility in Tyson's Corner, and it was amazing to watch because there was a customer who owned two Model 3s, and he was trying to convince his wife to buy a Model Y. She got in the car and pulled up behind her X5 BMW, and it turns out that the seating and the position of the Model Y is only inches taller, let's say, than the Model 3. And so if you're in traffic and you have supposedly an SUV, usually you can just see over all the cars that are on the road. Just gives you better sight lines on everything going on. But Elon has elected to not allow the Model Y to fully blossom. So there's a number of features. The biggest one for me, of all the lines, is the fact that S and Model X are not available on the Model Y yet. And so there are features like the height of the ride, air ride or no air ride. There's a number of sort of, I think, important features that will eventually come to the Model Y as the Model X sort of disappears. But Elon's doing everything he can to figure out how to reduce features in the Model Y to support people having a reason to purchase the Model X. And I just think that it's a losing battle that won't end for a while until it's blatantly obvious. I think when the battle really ends is once there are competing entities that have comparable vehicles in range, et cetera, and then there'll be no choice to make that transition. But I think they'll hold on for dear life. But Elon is going out in the process, but he's not going out quietly. So this kind of brings up, for example, the major issue I was talking about with Apple is that if you have people buying the cheaper alternative, will they buy the more expensive vehicle? And it's one thing for it to be a phone. When it comes to a car difference of 20 to 30K, we could definitely see a lot of customers making that transition to the less pricey vehicle, but with the functionality of being able to carry baby seats and other things that are really inefficient to carry in a sedan right now. So we're kind of fascinated by what we're going to see strategy-wise from Tesla, because I think that if you look at Elon, his competitive advantage as an executive is the fact that half the companies in Silicon Valley that are developed with the help of venture capital fail. And I believe that the main reason for that is marketing issues. And the biggest marketing issue is the fact that the engineers developing don't have a command of a range of issues affecting customers that are critical in terms of determining the viability of whatever the product or service is that's being developed. And by the time it gets to market, and that's when you're doing your marketing, there's a failure there. Elon has seemed to really grab hold of sort of customer needs and being able to bake them into vehicles and therefore have a lot of success in the process. One of the biggest sort of illustrations of this is the fact that there was just a news report that came out regarding the fact that Elon had stolen Tesla from Mr. Eberhard, who was one of the co-founders of Tesla. And I was impressed because there's actually a show out where Elon describes how this process went. So if you don't know how it works in Silicon Valley, what happens is that when a new or a big company is being funded, there's a process that goes on where they're trying to identify what's called a bankable CEO, or someone that the market has seen before be successful in the business they're doing. And then as they do that business, they successfully end up in a position where they can all of a sudden, they all of a sudden are in a great position where they have someone that they know is a competent CEO on the parameters that the marketplace might need. In Tesla's case with Mr. Eberhard, the problem that came up was that Elon explained that they had agreed that on what the price point was of the Model S when it came out. And based on some changes made by Mr. Eberhard, he in essence told Elon one thing and did another. And when Elon found out about the differences, he rolled back into Palo Alto, decided to do the firing. But the next problem was who was going to be CEO, and he actually didn't want to do it. That's why he helped fund the company and was just sitting on the board, even though he was a major influence on what was going to happen. So Needless to say, he did take over as CEO and therefore had to be CEO of two companies, SpaceX and Tesla at the same time. And it's amazing that he didn't die under the stress of two full-time jobs in that manner. But obviously, he's done a great job and he deserves a great deal of credit. So I would say I agree with Elon that I completely disagree in terms of Elon sort of stealing it from Mr. Eberhard, because had they been able to meet on parameters, I think that it wouldn't have been an issue. And in particular, the parameter was that the price point for the Model S was scheduled to be a certain level. Mr. Eberhard's finished product was ending up at a much higher price point, which was unacceptable to Elon. But this emphasis that he has on customer needs and making sure that you meet those bogeys within your company is a sort of critical example of how one might consider sort of a process of sort of setting and structuring your company. So much props to Tesla and Elon for being cost conscious. We have a show coming up about the fact that, one of the things that Elon has done is really sort of kept the management team fairly young, which actually saves a lot of money because you don't pay high price executives. There are some interesting ways in which it's affecting what the company has been doing structurally and performance-wise in the recent months. At any rate, so our overall suggestion then is that we think that Tesla will really keep track, and they've already been doing it to some extent, of the process Apple is going through of offering tiered pricing so that they can hit more price points and meet customer needs in those zones. I think it's interesting because Tesla is battling a little bit, because I've seen a lot of folks who can afford the more expensive models dropping down to the Model 3 out of Model X, S's and X's, et cetera. And so I think this is going to be a continuous battle going forward for Tesla to figure out how to get the right set of incentive so that they can tier what customers end up buying. And obviously it'll impact success going forward. At any rate, wanted to next move to our health tips. Don't forget, 25 leg lifts a day while seated with a 5-pound weight on each leg. Want to also encourage you to consider no more than once a week 5 foods. Also want to encourage you to consider a 35 SPF or better to avoid skin cancer issues. And I also wanted to encourage you to maybe play an instrument or go dancing, any of those things to help maintain brain function. This is Greg for Teslafaninsight. Please take time to like and subscribe. Tschüss, German, au revoir, French, Lehithro, Hebrew, Hoda, Hafez, Farsi, Ni hao ma, hello in Chinese, Zdravstvuyte, hello in Russian, Namaste, Hindu, Assalamu alaikum, Muslim, Hey Do, Swedish, and in Jamaica we say Nuff Respect Walk Good Man. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to our next conversation. Have a great day, and bye.